The perfectionism is just an unnecessary pressure that I'm putting on myself. It's kind of ironic that because of perfectionism, it's taken me this long to make a new video, let alone one about this very topic. Being a perfectionist is something that seems like a really good, humorous response to that job interview question when they ask, please tell us about your weaknesses. But being a perfectionist really can be a bad thing when you let things grow too much. Stifling progress, giving more time to thoughts over action, and giving that inner critic a bigger voice than it already needs. Perfectionism really can go wild. When I look back at school, I can see it a lot clearer now that I was very much a perfectionist. I would always be very, very hard on myself. If I had a good grade, I would still be looking at the next grade that I could have got. Even though I did try my hardest, I always felt like there was more that I could get out of myself, but I didn't really know how to do that. Recently now, I have noticed that my perfectionism has got to a point where it's uncontrollable. I now have a new level of anxiety that I've never felt before, and I'm constantly worrying about the quality of the work that I do, even to the extent of how I am as a person. It's transcended into every time I post a video, I worry that I'm going to spot something after I've already made everything and put it out there, worrying that if I make a mistake, it will suddenly downgrade everything that I've made and people will hate it and then they won't like me, and it just spirals out of control. So I was watching a video recently by the School of Life, which is an excellent channel, and they described perfectionism as an under budget for difficulty. And I feel like this was a really good explanation because sometimes I don't budget for the difficulty of, for instance, starting a new task. I will expect myself to be able to do it all perfectly in the first time that I try it. And of course, that doesn't happen. As we know when we're making our videos, it is never just the first take, it's probably take 32. Our judgment is sometimes unforgiving. No one expects to pick up a guitar and be a professional in an instant, so why do we put this pressure on ourselves? It's not necessarily that we're aiming too high, it's just that we're not accepting the patience that it requires to get to that point. And there's a lot of lessons in between learning how to do something, the skills, the mistakes that you'll probably not make again because you have learnt them, the mistakes that we need to make so that we can actually get better. Of course, when doing anything, it is a journey, and as cliche as that sounds, it is about practicing to enjoy that moment of getting from A to B, because we can easily set ourselves these goals, and if we had them in an instant, it would become very boring. And especially as a creative, the problem with being a creative sometimes is that you can also see everyone else's stats. We're looking at people that may have spent enough time themselves learning the ropes and building up their journey. At the end of the day, we're not giving consideration to the difficulties that they may have faced. We look at someone on a face value and think, wow, their quality of work is amazing. But what we don't know is that possibly they might have spent 4 or 5 years doing videography or maybe photography in their own spare time, because obviously you only know about someone as much as they post, and sometimes we give ourselves unrealistic expectations because we're building a picture without all the details. Is this video good enough? Am I giving the best value that I can? Kind of important to ask these questions, but also not to hold so much weight to have an answer. Sometimes we're not always going to have the answers, and that is okay because that's part of the learning. You've got to keep pushing through, and you might not even realize that you've got the answer or that you've reached to the answer point because we're always looking at the next thing. I have written and released a new song, but it was one of these songs that I spent forever making. And I got to a point where it was actually quite unenjoyable, and I was getting kind of agitated because I wanted to release it, but then at the same time, I didn't want to release it because I was terrified there was going to be rubbish, that people were going to think, oh my god, is this really what she's putting out? And the problem was that because of the factor that I hadn't released a song in a while, problem was that I couldn't stop messing around with it. I either didn't like my vocals, and I must have re-recorded them like 5 times before I eventually, finally let the song go. And it was the thing that all of my worries, all of my fears, even when I was releasing the song, I was still thinking, oh, maybe I could have changed this, I could have done this, I could have done that. And everything that I was worrying about didn't even exist to anyone else. It was one of those things that everyone was listening to the song, they were saying they loved it was enjoyable, blah, 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 and no one noticed the stuff that I was criticizing. There's an element to when you're releasing something that you've creatively made, it's a part of you. Sometimes you might also take that criticism to heart, and this was my problem. I was taking too much of it to heart. Like, I thought, because someone didn't listen to my song, that I was rubbish and that I should never make music again, and you can imagine the spiral that goes down from that. I was honestly focusing so much on very minor details. As much as you love the labour of working with the piece that you're working on, there is something about releasing it to share that with everyone, because you are proud of your work. There is an element where you're proud enough that you want to release it as well. And when I was thinking about that, thinking, yeah, okay, I could keep tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it. And yeah, then I will get to a point where I just won't end up releasing it because I'll still be unhappy. And I think it was at that point where I was just realizing that I sometimes need to let go. I think it's really easy for us to say we just need to accept a few things, because accepting can be really, really difficult. And this is something that I'm currently finding. It is quite a process. No matter what we do, no matter what the kind of work that we put out, it will always be subjectively measured. Who else has recorded a song or a video and they thought it was their best piece of work? They put it out and it didn't get the response that you thought. This is the thing that I'm talking about. People will always have a different opinion a lot of the times to you, and especially about your own work. And sometimes we just need to relax on our inner critic that has far too big of a voice at the moment. And we need to tell ourselves that what we have done so far is good enough, and that if we keep practicing, we can only get better. One of the main points is understanding what is in your control. And majority of it won't be. A lot of it will be external factors, that you're thinking about the outcome of the final product. You're not thinking about the process of how you're going to get from 0 to the final product. And the only way you can get better is just by doing it. It's the stuff that you kind of don't see at the same time until you look back. And I know for me, I do tend to look forward a lot of the time. I don't spend too much looking back, because you can get sucked into a bit of a whirlpool, but at the same time, there is a level where sometimes it's good to just see the process of how far you've actually come along, because, you've done that. You made that journey. You've made those improvements, and it's so easy to say, yeah, but, someone else has done it. And does it matter? You've done it too. And you need to congratulate yourself for that. But as much perfectionism has actually helped to push me further, it's also held me back on other things as well, because obviously I'm then constantly searching for improvement and constantly putting myself down, which is, again, not a very healthy habit at all. And it's pretty much become self-improvement on steroids. But I'm navigating through the concept of learning to let go, to give myself the patience and time that I probably would give to someone else, but sometimes we need to give that value to ourselves as well, because acceptance requires practice too.